The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Murphy's, California, and Felicity Porter clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, knowing that somewhere behind her, 3 bounty hunters were closing in on a trail that would lead them straight to this dusty mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills. She descended from the coach on trembling legs, her dark blue traveling dress already coated with the fine gold country dust that seemed to settle on everything in this place. And she wondered if Samuel Garrett, the rancher who had answered her letter and agreed to marry a woman he had never met, would still want her once he discovered the truth about who she really was and what she had done back in Missouri. The year was 1872, and Murphy's had seen better days since the initial gold rush fever had cooled, but the town still bustled with enough activity to make Felicity hope she could disappear into its fabric, become just another face among the miners, ranchers, and their families who called this place home. She stood on the wooden sidewalk, her honey-colored hair pinned beneath a simple bonnet, her green eyes scanning the street for any sign of the man who was supposed to meet her. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and she felt sweat trickle down her spine beneath her corset and layers of proper feminine clothing that suddenly seemed absurdly heavy and restrictive. A tall figure separated from the shadows near the livery stable, and Felicity's breath caught in her throat as she watched him approach. Samuel Garrett was not what she had expected from his brief, businesslike letters. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that stretched the fabric of his worn cotton shirt, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat that shaded eyes she could not yet see. He wore dusty denims and boots that had seen years of hard use, and a gun belt sat low on his hips in a way that suggested he knew how to use the weapon it carried. "Miss Porter." His voice was deep and rough, like whiskey poured over gravel, and when he removed his hat, she saw that his eyes were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering over the mountains. His face was weathered and tanned from years of outdoor work, with strong features that would never be called classically handsome, but held a rugged appeal that made her heart skip in an entirely unexpected way. "Mr. Garrett." She extended her gloved hand, and he took it carefully, as though afraid his calloused fingers might damage something fragile. "Thank you for meeting me. Call me Sam." He released her hand and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from town. We can get your things loaded and head out before dark if you are ready." Felicity nodded, acutely aware that every moment she spent in town increased the risk of being recognized. The wanted poster had been printed 3 months ago, after that terrible night when everything had gone so wrong, and she knew copies had been distributed throughout California. $500 was enough money to make any struggling miner or ranch hand take a second look at a woman traveling alone, and she had been careful to keep her head down and her face partially hidden since crossing the state line from Nevada. Sam lifted her trunk and carpetbag into the wagon bed with an ease that spoke of considerable strength, and then he helped her up onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. The wagon springs creaked under their combined weight, and he clicked his tongue to the horses, setting them in motion down the main street of Murphy's and out onto the rutted road that wound through the rolling hills covered in oak trees and pines. They rode in silence for the first few minutes, and Felicity found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. His profile was strong, with a straight nose and a firm jaw shadowed with stubble that suggested he had not taken time to shave that morning. His hands on the reins were large and capable, scarred in places from what she imagined was years of ranch work, roping cattle, mending fences, breaking horses. There was something solid and reassuring about his presence, and she felt an unexpected sense of safety sitting beside him, even as guilt gnawed at her conscience for the deception she was perpetrating. "I appreciate you agreeing to this arrangement," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "I know it must seem strange, marrying someone you have never met." Sam glanced at her, and she saw something flicker in those gray eyes before he returned his attention to the road. No stranger than a woman traveling halfway across the country to marry a man she knows nothing about except what he could fit in a few letters. Takes courage to do what you did. If only he knew the real reason she had fled Missouri, Felicity thought, her hands twisting in her lap. If only he knew that courage had nothing to do with it, that desperation and fear had driven her west, that she was running from a murder charge she did not deserve, but could never prove her innocence against. The memory of that night rose unbidden in her mind. The sound of the gunshot, the sight of Harrison Blackwell falling, the way his business partner had looked at her with cold calculation, before shouting for the sheriff and claiming she had shot the man in cold blood over a business dispute. "Are you all right?" Sam's voice pulled her from the dark spiral of her thoughts, and she realized she had been sitting rigid, barely breathing. "Yes, just tired from the journey." She forced a smile. "It has been a long few weeks." He nodded, accepting her explanation, and pointed ahead to where the road crested a hill. "The ranch is just beyond that rise. It is not much, but it is mine, clear and paid for. 300 acres of decent grazing land, a sturdy house, good water from a spring-fed creek that runs year-round. I run about 200 head of cattle, and I have 3 horses besides these 2 pulling the wagon." As they topped the hill, Felicity saw the ranch spread out below them, and her breath caught at the unexpected beauty of it. The house was a solid structure of wood and stone, single-story but well-maintained, with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, all in good repair, and beyond them stretched pasture-land dotted with grazing cattle. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding traces of last winter's snow, and the whole scene was painted in the golden light of the late afternoon sun. "It is beautiful," she said softly, and meant it. For the first time since leaving Missouri, she felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, a sense that perhaps she could build a life here, that perhaps she could leave the past behind and become the person Sam's letters had suggested he was looking for. Someone steady and reliable to help him build something lasting in this hard country. Sam pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake before jumping down and coming around to help her descend. His hands on her waist were strong and sure, and he lifted her down as easily as he had lifted her trunk, setting her gently on the ground before releasing her. She felt the absence of his touch like a physical thing, which startled her. She had not expected to feel anything for this stranger she had agreed to marry, had thought of the arrangement as purely practical, a means of escape and survival. The unexpected attraction she felt toward him complicated everything. "I will show you around," Sam said, leading her toward the house. "The bedroom is yours. I have been sleeping in the spare room since I got your letter accepting my proposal, and I will continue to do so until we are properly married, and you are comfortable with other arrangements." Felicity felt heat rise in her cheeks at the implication of his words, but she appreciated his thoughtfulness. "When did you plan for the wedding to take place?" "There is a circuit preacher who comes through Murphy's once a month. He is due back in 2 weeks. I thought that would give you time to settle in, to be sure this is what you want." He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "But if you want more time, or if you decide this is not right for you, I will respect that. I will give you enough money for a ticket back east, no questions asked." The interior of the house was neat and surprisingly well furnished, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and several comfortable-looking chairs arranged near the hearth. Everything was clean but had the slightly worn look of items that had been used hard and cared for well, and she could see Sam's personality in the practical arrangement of the space. He showed her the bedroom, which contained a large bed covered with a colorful quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the pastures toward the mountains. "My mother made that quilt," he said, nodding toward the bed. "She passed 5 years ago, but I kept some of her things. Seemed ashamed to let them go to waste. It is lovely." Felicity ran her fingers over the intricate stitching, touched by the unexpected sentiment. "You must miss her. Every day." Sam's voice was rough with emotion, and he cleared his throat. "My father died when I was 15, and she held this place together through sheer determination until I was old enough to take over. She was the strongest person I ever knew." They stood in silence for a moment, and Felicity felt the weight of her deception pressing down on her. This man was offering her something precious, a home, a future, a chance at the kind of solid, honest life she had always wanted, and she was repaying his kindness with lies. She opened her mouth to tell him the truth, to confess everything and let him decide whether he still wanted to go through with the marriage, but fear closed her throat. What if he turned her in? What if he decided she was not worth the risk? She could not face going back to Missouri in chains, could not face the certainty of a hangman's noose for a crime she had not committed. "I will let you rest and freshen up," Sam said, misinterpreting her silence. "I need to check on the stock and do evening chores. There is water in the pitcher, and I will have supper ready in about an hour. Nothing fancy, just beef stew and biscuits. You cook?" Felicity could not keep the surprise from her voice. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she had seen from him, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Bachelor rancher learns to cook or starves. I am not going to pretend I am a gourmet chef, but I can manage the basics. One of the reasons I was looking for a wife was the hope of eating something other than my own cooking." After he left, Felicity sank down on the edge of the bed and let her head fall into her hands. She was so tired, bone-deep exhausted from weeks of running, of looking over her shoulder, of sleeping with one eye open in cheap boarding houses and on hard stagecoach benches. The bed beneath her was soft and inviting, and the room smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, clean and wholesome scents that made her want to weep for reasons she could not fully articulate. She forced herself to stand and pour water from the pitcher into the basin, stripping off her gloves and splashing her face, washing away the dust of travel. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand showed a woman who looked older than her 23 years, with shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that came from constant tension. She had been pretty once, or so people had told her, but fear and exhaustion had stolen whatever bloom she might have possessed. The sound of a horse approaching at speed brought her to the window, her heart immediately jumping into her throat. Through the glass, she saw a rider coming up the road toward the house, and even from a distance she could see the glint of a badge on his chest. A lawman. Terror flooded through her, and she pressed herself against the wall beside the window, her mind racing through possibilities. Had they already tracked her here? Had someone in town recognized her from the wanted poster? Should she run, try to reach the horses in the barn and flee before he could arrest her? She heard voices outside, Sam's deep rumble and another man's higher-pitched tones, but she could not make out the words. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, and she pressed her hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she heard footsteps on the porch, and Sam called out, "Felicity, can you come out here for a moment?" Her legs felt like water as she walked through the house and stepped out onto the porch. The lawman sat his horse easily, a man in his 30s with sandy hair and a weathered face, and his eyes swept over her with professional assessment. She lifted her chin and met his gaze, refusing to show the fear that churned in her stomach. "This is Sheriff Tom Whitmore from Murphy's," Sam said, and there was something in his voice, a protective note that had not been there before. "He wanted to warn us about some trouble that might be headed our way." "Trouble?" Felicity's voice came out steadier than she felt. The sheriff nodded. "Got word from the telegraph office this afternoon. 3 bounty hunters came through Angel's Camp yesterday, asking questions about a woman matching your description. They are following the stage route, checking every town between there and Sacramento." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "I know who you are, Miss Porter. Or should I say Miss Felicity Porter, wanted for the murder of Harrison Blackwell in St. Louis." The world seemed to tilt beneath Felicity's feet, and she might have fallen if Sam had not stepped close and taken her arm, steadying her. She waited for him to push her away, to tell the sheriff to take her, to wash his hands of the whole mess. But instead, his grip tightened, and he positioned himself slightly in front of her, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of protection. "Did you do it?" Sam's question was directed at her, not the sheriff, and his gray eyes searched her face. "Did you kill that man?" "No." The word burst from her with all the pent-up emotion of the past 3 months. "I swear to you I did not. Harrison Blackwell was my employer. I worked as a bookkeeper in his shipping office. He was kind to me, helped me when I had nowhere else to go after my father died. The night he was killed, I was working late, trying to finish the quarterly accounts. I heard arguing in his private office and then a gunshot. When I ran in, he was already dying, and his partner, Gerald Thorne, was standing over him with a gun. Gerald saw me and smiled, and then he shot himself in the arm and started screaming that I had tried to kill them both." "Why would he do that?" Sheriff Whitmore asked, but his tone was not accusatory, merely curious. "Because I had discovered that he was embezzling from the company," Felicity said, the words tumbling out now that she had started. "I had found discrepancies in the books, money that was being funneled into accounts that did not exist. I was going to tell Harrison that night, was going to show him the evidence I had gathered. Gerald must have realized what I had discovered. He killed Harrison and framed me for it, and now he has the company to himself and no one to challenge his lies." Silence fell on the porch, and Felicity realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face that she did not bother to wipe away. Everything felt hopeless, all her running for nothing, her brief fantasy of building a new life here shattered before it could even begin. "I believe you," Sam said quietly, and she jerked her head up to stare at him. "What? I believe you." He looked at the sheriff. "Tom, you have known me since we were boys. Have I ever been a poor judge of character?" "No, you have not." The sheriff dismounted and came up onto the porch, and Felicity tensed, but he made no move to arrest her. "The thing is, Sam, what I believe does not matter much. She has a price on her head, and those bounty hunters are going to come looking. Even if we could prove she is innocent, which would mean getting evidence out of Missouri, a process that could take months if it is even possible, she would have to go back and stand trial. Given that this Gerald Thorne is apparently a wealthy businessman with connections, her chances of getting a fair hearing are slim to none. Then she does not go back." Sam's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "She stays here, and if those bounty hunters come around, they will have to go through me." "Sam, you cannot fight the law." Sheriff Whitmore shook his head. I am sympathetic, truly I am, but harboring a fugitive could cost you everything you have built here. Let them come." Sam turned to face Felicity fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You are safe here. I am not going to let anyone take you. You do not even know me," she whispered. "Why would you risk so much for a stranger?" "Because you came here looking for a new start, same as my parents did when they first settled this land. Because this country was built by people running from something, looking for a second chance. Because I look at you and I see someone who has been beaten down by circumstances beyond her control, and I will be damned if I am going to stand by and let that continue." He reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb, the gesture so tender that it made her want to weep even harder. "And maybe you are not as much of a stranger as you think. I have been alone for a long time, Felicity. When I put that advertisement in the paper looking for a wife, I was not just looking for someone to cook and clean. I was looking for a partner, someone to share this life with, someone to build something with. Your letters, even though they were brief, showed me a woman who was intelligent and kind and strong enough to take a chance on the unknown. That is the kind of person I want beside me." Felicity could not find words to respond, overwhelmed by the emotion pouring through her. This man, this stranger who had known her for less than a day, was offering her something she had never expected to find, not just safety but acceptance, possibly even something more. Sheriff Whitmore sighed heavily. "All right, here is what I am going to do. Officially, I never saw Miss Porter. She never arrived on that stage, and I have no knowledge of her whereabouts. If those bounty hunters come to me, I will tell them the truth, that no one matching her description has come through Murphy's to my knowledge. But Sam, you need to understand what you are taking on. Those men are not going to give up easily, not with $500 on the line. And if this goes bad, if they find her here, I cannot protect you from the consequences. Understood?" Sam extended his hand, and the sheriff shook it firmly. After Tom Whitmore rode away, Sam led Felicity back into the house and sat her down in one of the chairs near the cold fireplace. He poured her a glass of water from a pitcher on the sideboard and pressed it into her shaking hands. "Drink," he ordered gently, and she obeyed, the cool liquid soothing her raw throat. "I am so sorry," she said when she could speak again. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have given you the choice before you ever agreed to meet me. Now I have dragged you into this mess, put you at risk, and you have every right to hate me for it. I do not hate you." Sam crouched down in front of her chair so that they were at eye level. "Felicity, look at me." When she met his gaze, she saw no anger there, no recrimination, only a steady determination that made her want to believe that maybe, somehow, everything would be all right. "You did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that. And now you are here, and I meant what I said. You are safe here. We will face whatever comes together." "Together," she repeated, testing the word. She had been alone for so long since her father's death 2 years ago that the concept of having someone stand beside her felt almost foreign. "Together," he confirmed. "Now, I am going to finish those chores and get supper started. You rest here or go back to your room, whatever you need. We will figure out the details as we go." Over the next few days, Felicity settled into a routine at the ranch that felt both strange and comforting. Sam was true to his word about respecting her space, never pushing her, never making her feel uncomfortable. He slept in the spare room, and when they passed each other in the mornings, he was always polite and considerate, asking how she had slept, if she needed anything. She insisted on helping with the household tasks, and though Sam protested at first, saying she was supposed to be a guest until they were married, she argued that she needed to feel useful, needed something to occupy her hands and mind to keep the fear at bay. She took over the cooking, discovering that Sam had been understating his culinary limitations. The first time she served him a proper meal, pan-fried chicken with potatoes and greens she found growing in a small garden behind the house, he ate with such obvious appreciation that she found herself blushing. "This is incredible," he said, reaching for a second helping. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother, before she died when I was 12. After that, it was just my father and me, and someone had to keep us fed." She smiled at the memory, bittersweet as it was. He was a school teacher, brilliant with books and learning, absolutely helpless in the kitchen. I think he would have lived on bread and cheese if I had not intervened. "What happened to him?" Sam asked gently. His heart gave out. "The doctor said it was probably something that had been wrong for years, just waiting to happen. One day he was fine, and the next he collapsed during a lesson. He died before I could reach the school." She set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. That is when everything started falling apart. The school board had no position for a woman teacher, and I had no other skills that would earn decent wages. I was about to lose the house when Harrison Blackwell offered me the bookkeeping position. He said he was impressed by my father's intelligence and figured his daughter must have inherited some of his abilities with numbers. He sounds like he was a good man. He was. That is why I cannot let Gerald get away with what he did. Harrison deserves justice, but I have no idea how to get it for him without destroying myself in the process. Sam was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Tell me everything you remember about that night. Every detail, no matter how small." So she did, walking him through the sequence of events, the argument she had heard but could not make out clearly, the sound of the gunshot, the way Gerald had looked at her with such cold calculation before shooting himself and raising the alarm. She told him about the evidence she had gathered, the carefully documented discrepancies in the accounts that she had been compiling to show Harrison. "What happened to that documentation?" Sam asked. "I had it with me, in a ledger I kept separate from the office books. When I realized what Gerald was doing, that he was going to frame me, I grabbed it and ran. I knew it was the only proof I had of his embezzlement, the only thing that might eventually clear my name." She stood and went to retrieve her carpetbag from the bedroom, pulling out a thick leather-bound ledger from the bottom where she had hidden it beneath her clothes. "It is all here. Every false entry, every fictitious account, every dollar he stole over the course of 2 years. It amounts to more than $50,000. Sam whistled low. "That is enough motive for murder several times over." He took the ledger and flipped through it, his expression growing thoughtful. "This is good work, detailed and clear. With this, you could prove his guilt, but as Tom said, getting anyone in Missouri to listen would be next to impossible, especially with you being wanted for murder." "So it is useless," Felicity said flatly. "I did not say that. I said it would be difficult, but there might be another way." He tapped the ledger thoughtfully. "If we could get this information to the right people, federal authorities maybe, someone outside Gerald's sphere of influence, they might be willing to investigate. At the very least, it would cast doubt on his version of events." "And how would we do that from here?" "I have a friend, Jacob Morrison, who works for Wells Fargo in San Francisco. He deals with financial crimes, fraud, embezzlement, that sort of thing. If anyone would know how to proceed with this, it would be him. I could take this to him, see what he says." Hope flared in Felicity's chest, painful in its intensity. "Do you really think it might work?" "I think it is worth trying, but it will take time, and in the meantime we need to be careful. Those bounty hunters could show up any day." They came 3 days later, just after dawn. Felicity was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard the sound of horses approaching the house. Through the window, she saw 3 men riding up the road, and even from a distance, She could see the hard, weathered look of men who made their living hunting other people. Her blood turned to ice and she called out for Sam, her voice sharp with fear. He came immediately, still pulling on his shirt, his hair tousled from sleep. One look out the window told him everything he needed to know, and his face hardened into an expression she had not seen before, dangerous and utterly uncompromising. "Go into the bedroom and stay there," he ordered. "No matter what you hear, do not come out until I come for you." "Sam, there are 3 of them. You cannot go. Now." His voice left no room for argument, and she fled to the bedroom, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She pressed her ear against the door, straining to hear what was happening outside. The bounty hunters did not bother with pleasantries. She heard the front door open and Sam step out onto the porch, heard the creak of saddle leather as the men dismounted. "Morning," Sam's voice was calm, almost friendly. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" "We are looking for a woman," a gravelly voice said. "Felicity Porter. We got word she came through Murphy's on the stage a few days back, and we have been checking all the surrounding ranches. Lot of women come through Murphy's. It is a decent-sized town." This one was traveling alone, heading to meet a mail-order husband. That would be you, I am guessing, since you put an advertisement in the papers back east. "My personal business is my own concern. Look, friend, we do not want any trouble. We are just doing our job. The woman is wanted for murder back in Missouri. There is a price on her head, legal and proper. If she is here, you need to hand her over. And if I told you she was not here, then I would say you are lying." A different voice this time, younger and with an edge of aggression. "We tracked her stage to Murphy's, asked around, found out about you and your mail-order bride setup. She is here, and you are going to give her to us one way or another. I think you should leave." Sam's voice had gone cold and flat. "You are on my property without permission, making accusations without proof. Get back on your horses and ride out, and we will forget this happened. We are not going anywhere without that woman. Then I guess we have a problem." Felicity heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked, and she could not stand it anymore. She burst out of the bedroom and ran through the house, flinging open the front door before Sam could stop her. "Wait," she cried. "Please just wait." Sam spun toward her, anger and fear warring in his expression. "Felicity, get back inside." But she ignored him, moving to stand beside him on the porch and facing the 3 bounty hunters. They were exactly what she had expected, hard men with harder eyes. The kind who saw other people as nothing more than commodities to be collected and traded for cash. The one in the middle, the one with the gravelly voice, was the oldest, somewhere in his 40s, with a scar running down the left side of his face. The younger one who had spoken with such aggression could not have been more than 25, and there was a cruel set to his mouth that made her skin crawl. The third man said nothing, just watched with dark, calculating eyes. "I am Felicity Porter," she said, lifting her chin. "And I did not kill Harrison Blackwell. I was framed by his partner, who murdered him to cover up his own crimes." "Not our concern," the scarred man said. "We are here to collect the bounty. What happens to you after we turn you over to the authorities is between you and them. You would send an innocent woman to hang. Like I said, not our concern. You want to plead your case, do it in front of a judge." He took a step toward the porch, and Sam moved, positioning himself between Felicity and the bounty hunters with deliberate intent. "She is not going anywhere with you. You are making a big mistake, friend." The scarred man's hand drifted toward the gun on his hip. 3 against 1 are not odds any sane man would take. "Who said anything about sane?" Sam's voice was soft, deadly. "And you are assuming I care about the odds." The tension stretched taut as a wire. everyone frozen in the moment, and Felicity knew with absolute certainty that men were about to die on this porch. She could not let that happen, could not let Sam sacrifice himself for her, not when he had already given her so much. "I will go with you," she said, and Sam's head whipped toward her. "The hell you will, Sam, please. I cannot let you die for me. I will not." She reached out and took his hand, squeezing hard. "It is all right. Maybe if I go back, if I have the chance to present my evidence, to tell my side of the story, maybe someone will listen." "They will not listen. They will hang you, and that bastard Gerald Thorne will get away with murder." Sam's voice was raw with emotion. "I will not let that happen. It is not your choice to make. Like hell it is not. You think I am just going to stand here and watch them take you? You think I am going to let them drag you back to Missouri to die for something you did not do?" He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness given the fury in his eyes. "Felicity, I know we have only known each other a few days, but in that time, you have become important to me, more important than I ever expected. The thought of losing you, of knowing you are out there somewhere facing a noose, that is not something I can live with. Do you understand what I am saying?" She stared at him, seeing the truth written plainly in his expression, and her heart contracted with a complex mixture of joy and grief. "Sam, let them come," he said, echoing the words he had spoken to Sheriff Whitmore. "You are safe here. I meant that then, and I mean it now." The scarred bounty hunter laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "This is real touching and all, but we are done talking. You can step aside and live, or you can die trying to protect her. Either way, we are taking her with us." What happened next occurred so fast that Felicity barely had time to process it. Sam moved with a speed that belied his size, his hand going to his gun and clearing leather in a motion so smooth, it seemed almost effortless. The shot rang out before the scarred man could even draw, and he went down with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The younger bounty hunter managed to get his gun out, but Sam's second shot took him in the leg, dropping him to the ground. The third man, showing more sense than his companions, raised his hands and carefully backed away from his weapon. "You shot me," the scarred man howled, writhing in the dust. "You shot me, you crazy son of a... and I will shoot you again if you do not shut up and listen," Sam interrupted, his gun still trained on the three men. "Here is how this is going to work. You are going to get on your horses and ride out of here. You are going to tell anyone who asks that Felicity Porter was never at this ranch, that you found no trace of her. And if I ever see any of you on my property again, I will not be aiming for your shoulders and legs. Are we clear? We are just going to bleed out here." The younger man whimpered, his face pale with pain and shock. "I will send word to the doctor in Murphy's to come patch you up once you are well away from my land. Consider it a courtesy you do not deserve." Sam gestured with his gun. "Now move." The third man helped his injured companions onto their horses, casting wary glances at Sam the whole time. The scarred man was still cursing, promising revenge and legal retribution, but Sam ignored him, keeping his weapon trained on them until they were mounted and moving away down the road. Only when they were out of sight did he finally lower his gun and turn to Felicity. She was shaking violently, the aftermath of terror and adrenaline turning her legs to water, and Sam caught her as she swayed, pulling her against his chest and holding her tight. She buried her face in his shirt and let herself cry, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. All the fear and stress of the past months pouring out in a flood she could not control. "It is all right," Sam murmured, one hand stroking her hair while the other stayed wrapped around her waist, anchoring her. "You are safe. I have got you. You could have died," she choked out between sobs. "You could have died because of me. But I did not. And neither did you." That is what matters." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on the porch, until Felicity's tears finally subsided and she could breathe again without hitching. When she pulled back to look up at him, she saw that his face was softer than she had ever seen it, the hard edges smoothed away by something that looked almost like tenderness. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do that? Risk everything you have built here for someone you barely know?" Sam was quiet for a moment, his hand still tangled in her hair, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because when I look at you, I do not see a stranger. I see someone brave and strong who has survived things that would have broken most people. I see someone who deserves a chance at happiness, at peace, at a life without fear. And maybe it is crazy, maybe it is too soon, but I think I am falling in love with you, Felicity Porter. So no, I could not just stand by and let them take you. I would rather die than live in a world where I did nothing to protect you." Felicity's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sam, you do not have to say anything. I know this is a lot and you are still processing everything that just happened. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand why I did what I did." He started to pull away, giving her space, but she tightened her grip on his shirt, holding him in place. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and right. "I did not expect it, did not think I was capable of feeling anything but fear anymore, but you have shown me such kindness, such strength. You make me feel safe in a way I have not felt since before my father died. And the thought of leaving you, of never seeing you again, that terrifies me more than any bounty hunter ever could." Sam's eyes searched her face, and then he lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she did not want to. She rose on her toes and met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home, like finding something she had been searching for her entire life without even knowing it. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, but it quickly deepened as Sam pulled her closer, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. He tasted like coffee and morning air, and his mouth was warm and surprisingly soft against hers. She felt his heart pounding against her chest, matching the rapid tempo of her own, and when they finally broke apart, both breathless, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Well," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, "that was worth waiting for." Felicity laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine lightness. Indeed it was. They went inside, and Sam cleaned and holstered his gun while Felicity tried to calm her still racing heart. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. She had been living under the shadow of fear for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to hope, to believe that maybe things could actually work out. "We need to be prepared for them to come back," Sam said, his practical side reasserting itself. "Those men are not going to give up on $500 that easily. They will likely head back to Murphy's, get their wounds tended, and then regroup. We bought ourselves some time, but not much. What do we do? First, I ride into town and have a conversation with Tom Whitmore. He needs to know what happened. Then I am going to send a telegram to my friend Jacob in San Francisco. See if we can expedite getting that evidence of yours into the right hands. If we can prove Gerald's guilt, or at least cast enough doubt on the charges against you, it might take the wind out of those bounty hunters' sails. And in the meantime, we stay vigilant. I have a rifle and a shotgun in addition to my pistol, and I will teach you how to use them if you do not already know. This is your home now, Felicity, and you have every right to defend it." Over the following days, Sam was true to his word. He rode into Murphy's and spoke with Sheriff Whitmore, who was sympathetic but warned that the bounty hunters were indeed in town. getting medical treatment and making loud noises about bringing charges against Sam for assault. Tom managed to talk them down by pointing out that they had been trespassing on private property, and that Sam had acted within his rights as a landowner to defend himself and his home. Sam also sent a detailed telegram to Jacob Morrison in San Francisco, along with copies of the most damning pages from Felicity's ledger. The response came back within 2 days. Jacob was intrigued by the evidence and thought he might be able to get the attention of federal investigators who were already looking into financial crimes in Missouri. It would take time, possibly months, but there was a real chance of building a case against Gerald Thorne. In the meantime, life at the ranch fell into a new rhythm. Sam taught Felicity how to shoot, taking her out to a clearing beyond the pastures and setting up targets. She had never handled a gun before and was nervous at first, but Sam was a patient teacher, showing her how to hold the weapon, how to aim, how to breathe through the recoil. After a week of practice, she was not an expert by any means, but she could hit what she was aiming at more often than not, and that gave her a measure of confidence she had been lacking. They also began working together on the ranch, and Felicity discovered that she enjoyed the physical labor, the sense of accomplishment that came from mending a fence or helping to move cattle from one pasture to another. Sam worked beside her, never asking her to do anything he would not do himself, and she found herself watching him when he thought she was not looking, admiring the way he moved, the easy strength in his body, the careful consideration he gave to every task. The evenings were her favorite time. They would finish dinner and sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains and talking about everything and nothing. Sam told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents and the hardships they had faced building a life in this rugged country. She told him about her childhood, about her father's love of learning and her mother's quiet strength, about the books she had read and the dreams she had harbored before circumstance had forced her to set them aside. "What did you dream of?" Sam asked one evening, his hand finding hers where it rested on the porch railing. "Silly things, mostly. I wanted to travel to see the ocean, to visit big cities like New York and Boston. I wanted to have a family, children to raise and teach the way my father taught me. I wanted a home that was truly mine, where I could put down roots and build something lasting." She paused, then added softly, "I wanted to be loved, to have a partner who saw me as an equal, someone to share my life with." "Those are not silly things," Sam said, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "Those are the things that make life worth living." She turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his face. "What about you? What did you dream of?" "Pretty much what I have now, honestly. I always wanted to make a success of this ranch, to honor my parents' legacy. But I also wanted someone to share it with, someone who could see the beauty in this place the way I do. Someone who would not be afraid of hard work, but would also appreciate the quiet moments, the sunset over the mountains, the sound of the wind in the pines." He smiled. "I wanted what my parents had, a partnership built on mutual respect and affection. And maybe I am getting ahead of myself, but I think I might have found that with you." Felicity felt warmth spread through her chest. "The preacher comes through town in a few days. Do you still want to go through with the wedding? Do you?" She thought about it, really thought about it. A few weeks ago, marriage to Sam had been nothing more than a means of escape, a practical arrangement to give her a new identity and a place to hide. But somewhere along the way, it had become something more. She had come to care for this quiet, strong man who had risked everything to protect her, who had shown her kindness and patience and a glimpse of what her life could be if she was brave enough to reach for it. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "I do." The wedding took place in Murphy's 2 weeks after Felicity had arrived in California. in a small church that had been built during the gold rush days and had somehow survived the boom and bust cycles that had claimed so many other buildings. The preacher was an elderly man with kind eyes who asked no questions about Felicity's past or the circumstances that had brought her to Sam's ranch. Sheriff Whitmore stood as a witness, along with a few of Sam's friends from town who had known him for years, and were clearly curious about the woman who had captured his heart so quickly. Felicity wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton that she had purchased at the general store, and someone had loaned her a small bouquet of wildflowers. She felt nervous and excited and terrified all at once as she stood beside Sam in front of the preacher. But when he took her hand and looked down at her with such warmth and promise in his eyes, all her fears melted away. The ceremony was brief and traditional, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife and told Sam he could kiss his bride, he did so with a tenderness that made Felicity's eyes sting with happy tears. The small gathering applauded, and they signed the marriage certificate, making their union legal and binding in the eyes of the law. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Felicity was now Felicity Garrett, a married woman with a new name and a new life. The wanted posters still bore her maiden name, which provided an additional layer of protection. But more than that, she felt fundamentally changed by what had happened in that church. She had made vows to this man, promised to stand by him in good times and bad, and she meant every word. That night, Sam was careful with her, mindful that this was all still so new and that they had come together under unusual circumstances. He did not press her or make demands, simply held her close as they lay in the bed that was now theirs to share and told her how beautiful she was, how lucky he felt to have found her. "I never expected this," Felicity whispered into the darkness. "When I got on that stagecoach in Nevada, I thought I was running toward nothing but temporary safety at best. I never imagined I would find you." "Life has a way of surprising us," Sam said, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Sometimes the best things happen when we are not looking for them." She turned in his arms to face him, seeing his features outlined in the moonlight that filtered through the window. "I love you, Sam Garrett. I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I do. I love you." "I love you too, Felicity Garrett." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally her mouth, and what started as gentle and exploratory gradually deepened into something more urgent as their bodies responded to the closeness and the privacy and the new intimacy of being husband and wife. Their wedding night was everything Felicity had not even dared to hope for, tender and passionate and filled with whispered words of affection. Sam was patient and attentive, making sure she was comfortable and cared for, and when they finally came together, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, making them whole in a way that neither had been before. The weeks that followed were the happiest Felicity could remember in years. She threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding small touches that reflected her personality while respecting the memory of Sam's mother, whose presence still lingered in the carefully maintained furniture and the quilt on their bed. She planted herbs in the garden, hung curtains she sewed herself, and organized the kitchen to be more efficient. Sam continued to work the ranch, but now he had a partner to help him, and they fell into an easy rhythm of shared labor and shared evenings. They talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about maybe hiring a hand or two to help with the work as the ranch grew. They talked about children, about the family they both wanted to build, and those conversations filled Felicity with a hope she had thought lost forever. But the shadow of her past was never far away. Twice more, strangers came to the ranch asking questions, and each time, Sam turned them away with a combination of polite denial and barely veiled threat. The bounty hunters who had been wounded did not return, apparently having decided that $500 was not worth risking their lives, but there were always others willing to try their luck. Then, 3 months after Felicity had arrived in Murphy's, a telegram came from Jacob Morrison in San Francisco that changed everything. Sam rode into town to collect their mail and supplies and returned with an expression that Felicity could not quite read, somewhere between excitement and apprehension. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron as she met him at the door. He handed her the telegram, and she read it quickly, her heart beginning to pound. Jacob had managed to get the attention of federal investigators looking into financial crimes in Missouri. They had examined the evidence Felicity had compiled, and it was enough to open an official investigation into Gerald Thorne's business practices. Moreover, they had uncovered additional victims, other businesses where Gerald had worked and where money had mysteriously disappeared. The case against him was growing stronger by the day. "They want me to testify," Felicity said, looking up at Sam. "They need me to come back and give a formal statement to explain how I discovered the embezzlement and what I witnessed the night Harrison was killed." "I know." Sam took the telegram from her and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms. "It is what we have been hoping for, a chance to clear your name and bring Gerald to justice. But it means going back to Missouri. It means facing him again, facing all of it." She pressed her face against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Sam, I am terrified. I know you are. But you will not be alone. I am coming with you, and Jacob has assured me that the federal marshals will provide protection. You will be safe, Felicity. And once you testify, once the truth comes out, you will truly be free. No more running, no more looking over your shoulder. You can live your life without fear." She knew he was right, but that did not make it any less frightening. Still, she had not come this far only to hide forever. Harrison Blackwell deserved justice, and she was the only one who could give it to him. "All right," she said, lifting her head to meet Sam's eyes. "Let us go to Missouri and finish this." The journey east was long and tedious, made more bearable by Sam's constant presence at her side. They traveled by train, a luxury that Felicity had experienced only once before, and she found herself fascinated by the changing landscape as they crossed from California through the Nevada desert, over the Rocky Mountains, and finally into the plain states that led to Missouri. Sam was a steady companion, pointing out landmarks, keeping her spirits up when the reality of what they were traveling toward threatened to overwhelm her. At night, in the hotels where they stopped along the way, he held her and reminded her of all the reasons they were doing this, of the life waiting for them back in California once this ordeal was over. They arrived in St. Louis in late November, and the city felt both familiar and foreign to Felicity. She had lived here for 2 years after her father's death, had walked these streets and thought she was building a new life, but that all seemed like a lifetime ago. Now she saw the city through different eyes, hardened by experience and loss. Jacob Morrison met them at the train station, a tall, thin man with spectacles and a sharp, intelligent gaze. He greeted Sam warmly, the two men clearly having a friendship that went back years, and he treated Felicity with respectful courtesy that immediately put her at ease. "The investigators are eager to meet with you," Jacob explained as he led them to a waiting carriage. "They have been building their case against Gerald Thorne for the past 2 months, and your testimony is the final piece they need. He has been arrested and is currently being held pending trial." He has been arrested. Felicity could hardly believe it. On what charges? Multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud, and 1 count of murder. Another of his business partners came forward after hearing about the investigation. Apparently, Gerald had been systematically stealing from multiple ventures over the course of 5 years. The total amount he embezzled is close to $200,000. Felicity felt her knees go weak, and Sam's arm came around her waist, supporting her. 200,000. I had no idea it was that extensive. Neither did anyone else, which is a testament to how carefully he covered his tracks. But you started the unraveling when you discovered those discrepancies in the books. Without your evidence, none of this would have been possible. They were taken to a hotel where Jacob had secured rooms for them, and the next morning, Felicity met with the federal investigators. They were professional and thorough, asking her to walk them through everything she had discovered about Gerald's embezzlement, everything she had witnessed the night Harrison Blackwell was killed. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, dredging up memories she had tried so hard to bury. But Sam sat beside her the entire time, his hand clasping hers, lending her his strength. The investigators assured her that her testimony, combined with the evidence from the other victims and the forensic accounting that had been done on Gerald's business dealings, would be more than enough to convict him. The murder charge would be harder to prove since there had been no other witnesses, but the preponderance of evidence suggested that Gerald had killed Harrison to prevent the discovery of his crimes. The trial took place 2 weeks later, and Felicity testified for an entire day, answering questions from both the prosecution and the defense. Gerald sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of rage and hatred, but she refused to let him intimidate her. She told the truth clearly and calmly, and when she described finding Harrison dying on the floor of his office, when she recounted the cold smile Gerald had given her before shooting himself and framing her for the crime, she saw several members of the jury react with visible disgust. The defense tried to paint her as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta, but the financial evidence was too overwhelming to dismiss. Page after page of doctored books, false accounts, money disappearing into Gerald's pockets, while his business partners trusted him to handle their affairs honorably. It was damning, and by the time the prosecution rested their case, the outcome felt almost inevitable. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Gerald Thorne was sentenced to life in prison for embezzlement and fraud, and to hang for the murder of Harrison Blackwell. When the sentence was read, he lunged toward Felicity, screaming obscenities and threats, but the bailiffs restrained him and dragged him from the courtroom. It was over. After months of running, of fear, of living in the shadow of false accusations, it was finally over. The judge also formally dismissed all charges against Felicity, declaring her innocent and apologizing on behalf of the state of Missouri for the miscarriage of justice she had suffered. The wanted posters were recalled, the bounty rescinded, and she walked out of that courtroom a free woman. Sam was waiting for her in the hallway, and the moment she saw him, she ran into his arms and burst into tears, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude and sheer exhaustion. He held her tight, murmuring words of love and reassurance, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had been tilted sideways. "It is over," she sobbed. "Sam, it is really over." "I know, my love, I know." He kissed her forehead, her tear-stained cheeks. "You were so brave in there. I am so proud of you." They stayed in St. Louis for another week, tying up loose ends and meeting with Harrison Blackwell's family, who thanked Felicity for her courage in bringing Gerald to justice. Harrison's widow gave Felicity a small portrait of her late husband, and told her that Harrison had spoken highly of her, that he had considered her a friend as well as an employee. and that he would have been grateful for what she had done. Then, finally, they boarded the train and began the long journey back to California, back to the ranch, and the life they were building together. The trip felt different this time, lighter somehow, as though a weight Felicity had been carrying for months had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She could breathe again, could think about the future without fear clouding every thought. They arrived back in Murphy's just before Christmas, and the ranch had never looked more beautiful to Felicity's eyes. Snow dusted the mountains in the distance, and smoke curled from the chimney where she had left a fire banked before they departed. It was home, truly home, in a way that nowhere else had ever been. The months that followed were peaceful and productive. Spring came to the Sierra Nevada foothills, bringing wildflowers and green grass and the birth of new calves. Felicity discovered she was pregnant in March, and Sam's joy at the news was so profound and unrestrained that it made her laugh and cry at the same time. He became even more protective of her, trying to insist that she not work as hard, but she swatted away his concerns and continued helping around the ranch as much as her growing belly would allow. Their daughter was born in November, almost exactly a year after Felicity had first arrived in Murphy's. The labor was long and difficult, but Sam stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her. And when the midwife finally placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, Felicity thought her heart might burst from the sheer force of love she felt. They named her Hope, because that was what she represented, the fulfillment of everything they had fought for and dreamed of. Hope Garrett, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, was perfect in every way. And watching Sam hold his daughter for the first time, seeing the tears of joy streaming down his weathered face, Felicity knew that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along. More children followed in the years to come. A son they named Harrison, in honor of the man whose death had inadvertently brought Felicity and Sam together, was born 2 years after Hope. Then twin girls, Rose and Lily, arrived 3 years after that, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of a growing family. Sam expanded the ranch, hiring hands to help with the work and increasing the herd, until it was one of the most successful operations in Calaveras County. Felicity kept the books, her keen eye for numbers ensuring that they always knew exactly where they stood financially. And together, they built something solid and lasting, a legacy to pass down to their children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains as they had done countless times before. Their children were inside, the older ones helping to prepare dinner while the younger ones played, and the sound of their laughter drifted out through the open windows. "You ever regret it?" Sam asked, his arm around Felicity's waist. "Coming here, marrying me, everything that happened." Felicity looked up at him, seeing the man she had fallen in love with a decade ago, only now with more gray in his hair and more lines around his eyes from years of laughter and hard work and life. "Not for a single moment. You saved me, Sam. Not just from the bounty hunters or from hanging for a crime I did not commit, but from a life without purpose, without love. You gave me everything I had ever dreamed of and more than I ever thought possible." "You saved me too," he said softly. "I was just going through the motions before you arrived, working the ranch because it was what I knew how to do but not really living. You brought life to this place, brought joy and love and meaning. You made me whole." She rose on her toes and kissed him, a sweet, lingering kiss that tasted of 10 years of marriage and partnership and devotion. "I love you, Sam Garrett. I love you too, Felicity Garrett. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy and fear. The mail-order bride who had hidden the bounty on her head had found not just safety, but love and family and home with the cowboy who had said, "Let them come. You're safe here." And those words had proven to be more than just a promise. They had been a prophecy, a glimpse into a future filled with hope and happiness, and the quiet, profound joy of a life well lived together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. The children grew, and as they did, Felicity and Sam taught them the values that had sustained their own relationship. Honesty, hard work, loyalty, and the importance of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. Hope, their eldest, grew into a strong, intelligent young woman with her mother's head for numbers and her father's steady determination. Harrison was gentle and thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals that made him invaluable on the ranch. The twins, Rose and Lily, were as different as night and day despite their identical appearance. One quiet and introspective, the other bold and adventurous, but both possessing a fierce love for their family and their home. Sam's reputation as a fair and honorable rancher spread throughout the region, and he was often called upon to settle disputes between neighbors or to offer advice to younger ranchers just starting out. Felicity became known for her charitable work, helping to establish a school in Murphys that provided education to all children regardless of their family's financial situation. And she never forgot the struggles she had faced or the kindness that had been shown to her in her darkest hour. Sheriff Tom Whitmore remained a close friend, eventually retiring from law enforcement and spending his final years in a small house on the edge of town, frequently invited to the Garrett Ranch for Sunday dinners, where he would regale the children with stories of the old days. Jacob Morrison visited from San Francisco whenever his work allowed, and his friendship with Sam and Felicity deepened over the years, forged in the crucible of the trial that had cleared her name and brought justice to Harrison Blackwell. On a warm summer evening, 20 years after Felicity had first stepped off that stagecoach in Murphys, the family gathered on the porch for one of their regular dinners. Hope was there with her husband, a young lawyer she had met at university in Sacramento, and their infant son, Sam and Felicity's first grandchild. Harrison had brought the woman he was courting, a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch. The twins, now 16, were helping to set the long table that Sam had built specifically for these family gatherings, and the air was filled with the warm scent of roasting meat and fresh bread. As Felicity looked around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world, at the home they had built together, at the legacy they were creating, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey that had brought her here had been terrifying and painful, but it had also been necessary, the crucible through which she had been refined and remade into someone stronger than she had ever imagined she could be. Sam caught her eye from across the porch and smiled, that same warm, loving smile that still had the power to make her heart skip, even after 2 decades of marriage. He excused himself from the conversation he was having with their son-in-law and crossed to where she stood, taking her hand and pulling her gently away from the bustle of dinner preparations. "Come with me for a moment," he said, and she let him lead her out into the twilight, past the barn and the corrals, to a small hill that overlooked the ranch. They had stood on this spot many times over the years, watching their children play in the fields below, discussing plans for the future, or simply enjoying the peace and beauty of the land they called home. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, his arm settling comfortably around her shoulders. Everything. How far we have come, how blessed we have been, how grateful I am for every single day I have had with you. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you remember that first day when I stepped off the stagecoach and you were waiting for me? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and also the most frightened. I remember wanting to protect you even before I knew what you were running from. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I remember knowing, even then, that you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives, Felicity corrected gently. You gave me safety and love when I had neither. You stood by me when anyone else would have turned me away. You fought for me, believed in me, loved me when I was not sure I deserved any of those things. You deserved all of it and more. You still do. Sam turned her in his arms so that she was facing him, his gray eyes still as striking as the first day she had met him, full of love and devotion. Felicity Garrett, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Marrying you was the smartest decision I ever made, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Even knowing all the trouble I brought with me, she teased lightly. Especially knowing all the trouble you brought with me. Life with you has never been boring, and I would not change a single moment of it. He kissed her then, a deep, thorough kiss that spoke of 20 years of partnership and passion and profound affection. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Felicity rested her forehead against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Sam, more than I can ever properly express. You are my home, my partner, my greatest blessing. And you are mine, he murmured into her hair. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that, forever, Felicity. I am yours forever. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars began to appear overhead, and the sounds of their family drifted up from the ranch house below. The mail-order bride who had hidden the bounty on her head had found her happily ever after with the cowboy who had promised she would be safe. And that promise had blossomed into a love story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren for generations to come. A testament to the power of courage, faith, and the transformative force of true love. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand, their family greeted them with warm smiles and knowing looks. These evening walks had become a tradition over the years, moments stolen for just the two of them amid the beautiful chaos of raising a family and running a ranch. The children had learned not to interrupt unless absolutely necessary, and they respected their parents' need for these quiet moments of connection. Dinner was a lively affair, as it always was when the whole family gathered. Conversation flowed freely, punctuated by laughter and good-natured teasing. Hope's baby fussed, and Felicity took him from his mother's arms, rocking him gently and singing a soft lullaby that her own mother had sung to her so many years ago. Sam watched her with such love in his eyes that Hope had to look away, feeling like she was intruding on an intimate moment, despite the fact that they were surrounded by family. Later, after the dishes had been washed and put away, after the guests had departed and the children had retired to their rooms, Sam and Felicity prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 20 years. The routine was comfortable and familiar, each knowing the other's movements without having to look, anticipating needs and preferences developed over 2 decades of marriage. As they lay together in the darkness, Felicity's head on Sam's shoulder and his arm around her waist, she reflected on how different her life might have been if she had never gotten on that stagecoach, if she had tried to face the charges against her alone. If Sam had not been the kind of man who would risk everything for a stranger he had every reason to doubt. "Sam," she whispered into the quiet, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not put that advertisement in the paper, If I had never seen it and written to you." He was quiet for a moment, his hand tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Sometimes. And then I remember that I do not believe in coincidence. I think we were meant to find each other, Felicity. Maybe not in the way we did, with bounty hunters and murder charges and all the rest of it, but somehow, some way, I think we would have ended up together. Some things are just meant to be." "You have become quite the romantic in your old age," she teased. "I learned from the best," he replied, squeezing her gently. "Now go to sleep, my love. Tomorrow will be another busy day." But Felicity lay awake for a while longer, listening to Sam's breathing deepen and slow as he drifted off to sleep, feeling the solid warmth of his body beside her. She thought about all the people who had helped them along the way, Sheriff Whitmore and Jacob Morrison, and the federal investigators who had believed her story. She thought about Harrison Blackwell, whose death had set everything in motion but whose memory lived on in their son. She thought about Gerald Thorne, who had died in prison 5 years after his conviction, taking his hatred and greed to his grave. But mostly she thought about the man sleeping beside her, the cowboy who had looked at a frightened mail-order bride and seen someone worth fighting for, someone worth loving. He had given her everything: safety, home, family, love, and the freedom to be herself without fear. In return, she had given him the same, and together they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and perseverance that would echo through the generations of their family. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Felicity's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. She had been so afraid when she had fled Missouri, so certain that her life was over, that she would never know peace or happiness again. But she had been wrong. Sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures, and sometimes the greatest love stories began with the most desperate circumstances. She had hidden the bounty on her head, and he had said, "Let them come. You're safe here." Those words had changed everything, had opened the door to a future she could never have imagined. And now, 20 years later, lying in the arms of the man she loved with all her heart, surrounded by the family they had created together, she knew with absolute certainty that she was home at last, truly and completely home, and that no bounty hunter or false accusation or twist of fate could ever take that away from her again. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy became something of a legend in Murphy's, told and retold over the years with varying degrees of embellishment. Some versions emphasized the danger and excitement, the shootout with the bounty hunters and the dramatic trial in St. Louis. Others focused on the romance, the unlikely love that bloomed between two strangers brought together by circumstance. But the truth, as Sam and Felicity knew it, was simpler and more profound than any legend could capture. It was a story about two people who found each other when they needed each other most, who chose to stand together against impossible odds, and who built a life based on trust, respect, and an unwavering commitment to one another. It was a story about the redemptive power of love and the courage required to believe in second chances. It was a story about home, not as a place but as a person, the one who makes you feel safe and valued and whole. And it was a story that continued to unfold with each passing day, each new challenge faced and overcome together, each quiet moment of contentment shared on the porch at sunset, each grandchild born to carry on the legacy they had created. The mail-order bride who had hidden the bounty on her head had found her place in the world, and the cowboy who had said, "Let them come, you're safe here," had found his purpose in protecting and loving her. Together, they had created something beautiful from the ashes of fear and tragedy, and that beauty would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the enduring power of love and the simple truth that sometimes The best things in life come when we least expect them, when we are at our most vulnerable, when we take a leap of faith into the unknown and trust that someone will be there to catch us. And Sam Garrett had been there to catch Felicity Porter, to hold her and protect her and love her through all the days of their lives. And in doing so, he had saved himself as much as he had saved her. For that is what true love does. It transforms both people, making them stronger and better together than they ever could have been apart, creating something that transcends the individual and becomes eternal. As the years rolled on, and their hair turned gray and their children had children of their own, Sam and Felicity continued to work the ranch side by side, their partnership as strong at 60 as it had been at 25. They had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, had faced hardships and celebrated triumphs, and through it all, they had remained steadfastly devoted to one another. And when the time finally came for them to leave this world, as it must come for all living things, they went together, within days of each other, as though neither could bear to exist in a world that did not contain the other. Their children and grandchildren mourned them deeply, but also celebrated the incredible life they had lived and the love they had shared, a love so powerful and enduring that it had become the foundation upon which an entire family legacy was built. The ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of Harrison and his children, and the story of how it all began, with a frightened woman stepping off a stagecoach and a lonely cowboy offering her sanctuary, was passed down through the generations, never forgotten, always cherished. It became a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unlikely sources, that courage and compassion can change the course of a life, and that true love, when it is found and nurtured and protected, can create miracles. The mail-order bride had hidden the bounty on her head. The cowboy had said, "Let them come, you're safe here." And from that moment forward, everything had changed. Two lives that might have remained forever separate had instead intertwined into something greater than the sum of their parts, and the world was richer for it. Their love story became the stuff of family legend, told at gatherings and celebrations, a reminder of where they had come from and the values that defined them. Courage in the face of adversity, loyalty to those you love, and an unshakable belief in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. In the end, that was the true legacy of Sam and Felicity Garrett, not the successful ranch or the thriving family business, but the love they had shared and the example they had set for all who came after them. They had shown that it was possible to find hope in the darkest circumstances, to build a life from nothing, to love completely and be loved in return, and that was a legacy worth more than all the gold in California. And so the story ends, not with sadness but with celebration, not with loss but with gratitude for the lives that were lived and the love that was shared. The mail-order bride who had hidden the bounty on her head found her safe haven in the arms of the cowboy who promised to protect her. And together they created a love story for the ages, one that would be remembered and cherished for generations to come, a beacon of hope and inspiration for all who heard it. Their children made sure that the story was written down, preserved for future generations, so that their great-great-grandchildren would know the truth of how it all began, how a chance meeting between two desperate souls had blossomed into something extraordinary. The ranch house still stood 100 years later, lovingly maintained by descendants who understood the importance of honoring the past while building the future. And if you visited that ranch on a quiet evening when the sun was setting over the mountains and the shadows were growing long across the pastures, some said you could still feel their presence there, a sense of peace and love that permeated the very land itself, a reminder that true love never dies but lives on in the hearts and memories of those who come after. The mail-order bride had hidden the bounty on her head. The cowboy had said, "Let them come. You're safe here." And from those simple words, a legacy was born that would endure forever. A testament to the transformative power of love and the courage required to believe in second chances. And that, in the end, was the greatest treasure of all.